What if the deadliest enemy the Vikings ever faced carried no sword, no shield, no army at all, and yet returned every single year to hunt an entire people down in total silence? We remember them one way, don't we? Warriors with axes raised, long ships tearing through gray water, whole coastlines learning to fear their shadow. But strip away the legend, and you find a terrifying truth. The hardest battle a Viking ever fought was not on some foreign shore, sword against sword. It was fought at home, in the dark, against an enemy no blade could ever touch. Because in the frozen north, winter was never just a season. It was a siege. For months, the sun barely crawled above the horizon. The ground froze hard as iron. The sea turned black and gave up less and less, and everything that once grew simply died. And here, the killing began. Not with a scream, but with silence. A single, unprepared village could vanish before spring ever came. Its people gone not from war, not from raiders, but from something as quiet and patient as hunger itself. Now here is what almost no one understands today. The Viking obsession was never with fat as something to fear. To them, fat was survival wearing a different face. Fat was warmth, burning slow through the longest nights on Earth. Fat was the thin, trembling line between waking up in March and never waking up again. They did not fear calories. They feared running out of them before the light returned. So while the world pictures Vikings winning glory with strength and steel, their real war, the one that decided who lived and who disappeared, was fought somewhere far quieter. In the storehouse, in the smokehouse, in the cold black cellar beneath the floor. And this is the secret that changes everything you are about to hear. The Vikings did not survive winter by fighting it when it arrived. They defeated it 6 months before it ever came. The only question is how. How do you win a war against starvation, in the dark, before the first snow has even begun to fall? To understand how, you first have to see the North as the Vikings saw it. Because for a few short months, this brutal land became almost generous. When summer finally arrived, life exploded. The rivers filled with fish, the pastures turned green, the animals grew fat, and the daylight stretched on and on as if the sun were trying to make up for everything it had taken. This was the season of plenty, and everything on the Viking table came alive at once. Meat was strength, roasted and stewed over the central fire. Fish was the daily lifeline, so constant that it made up nearly a quarter of everything they ate. Grain was the backbone, ground into bread and porridge and brewed into ale. And milk was white gold, flowing from cattle, sheep, and goats through the warm months. Pork was so central that at some settlements, pigs account for up to 80% of the animal bones archaeologists still dig up today. But here is the cruel trick hidden inside all that abundance. Everything fresh is already dying. Meat rots, fish turns, fresh milk spoils in a single day. Summer was not a gift, it was a countdown, and every man, woman, and child knew it. So the whole village threw itself into a desperate race against time, harvesting, catching, gathering, storing, working through the long, bright days to bury away every scrap they could before the dark returned. Then came the coldest decision of all. As autumn faded, they slaughtered their own livestock, because there was never enough feed to keep every animal alive through winter. It was survival math, brutal and clear. And to win that race, the Vikings were forced to do something that would disgust the modern world. But before we reach that, understand the true enemy they were fighting, because it was never really the cold. It was decay. Rot was the silent thief that could empty a full storehouse by midwinter and leave a family with nothing. So the Vikings built their defenses, and they built them in layers. Their first weapon was the wind itself. They dried their food, hanging it in the crisp northern air until every trace of moisture was gone. And nothing preserved this way was more important than fish. Cod, split open and left to the cold, dry wind, hardened into stockfish, stiff as wood, light as a plank, and able to last for years. A single rack of drying cod was a wall against starvation. Their second weapon was salt, packed heavy around meat and fish, drawing the water out, choking the rot before it could begin. Their third was smoke, curling slow over slabs of meat, preserving and flavoring in the same breath. And the truly clever part is that they rarely trusted just one method. They layered their defenses, salting lightly, then smoking on top, so that if one line failed, the next would hold. Below the ground, they dug cold pits and cellars, lined with straw and animal hides, natural refrigerators hidden beneath the floor. And in the far, remote edges of their world, in places like Greenland and Iceland, they took whatever the sea surrendered: seal, walrus, even whales that washed ashore. Yet, strangely, the meat was often the smaller prize. A seal's skin was worth more than its flesh, cut into strong lines and rigging for the very ships that carried them across the ocean. But even with wind, salt, smoke, and stone, their single most powerful survival weapon was none of these. It was something alive and rotting at the very same time. That weapon was rot itself, controlled, tamed, and turned into a tool. This is the thing the modern world would flinch at. The secret the Vikings understood better than almost anyone. Fermentation. The art of letting the right kind of decay win, so the wrong kind never could. And nowhere was this genius clearer than with milk. In summer, the cows and sheep and goats gave more milk than a family could ever drink. In winter, they gave almost nothing. So how do you carry the richness of July into the darkness of January? You sour it. You let it change. Fresh milk became skyr, a thick, tangy yogurt-like food that lasted far longer than milk ever could. And the liquid left behind, the sour whey they called misa, held a hidden power of its own. It turned so acidic that it became a preservative, and meat sunk into barrels of that sour whey could stay edible for months. They did the same with fish, burying it, souring it, letting time and bacteria do the work, creating fermented dishes so pungent that their descendants still eat them today. From Norwegian rakfisk to Iceland's infamous fermented shark. Even their drink was born from this same patient magic. Clean water was not always safe, so they brewed it into ale, a weak, everyday beer thin enough that men, women, and even children drank it, not to get drunk, but to survive, pulling calories and safe hydration from every cup. And this is the quiet philosophy buried inside it all. To the Viking, letting food rot in exactly the right way was not disgusting. It was a negotiation with time and with death itself, taking the very thing that should have destroyed them and turning it into the thing that kept them alive. And so we return to the question we began with. How did the Vikings win a war against starvation before the first snow had even fallen? The answer is that their winter was never survived in winter at all. It was won in the summer, in the autumn, in every long day of drying, salting, smoking, and souring, in the sweat and foresight of people who understood that survival is simply preparation wearing a heavier coat. They did not conquer the dark with strength. They conquered it with patience. And here is something few ever stop to consider. That full storehouse was not just survival. It was power. The very same stockfish and salted meat that carried a family through winter could also be loaded onto a longship and carried across an ocean. The food that beat the darkness was the same food that fueled an age of exploration, letting the Vikings sail farther than almost anyone before them. It was never really the axe that built the Viking world. It was the quiet, unglamorous genius of the pantry, the patience, the planning, the deep respect for a harvest that would not come again for a year. And maybe that is the part worth carrying with us. Today we have refrigerators that hum in the corner and meals that arrive at our door. and we have quietly forgotten the life and death weight that once sat behind every single bite. The Vikings never forgot. They knew that survival always begins with what you choose to save today for the hunger that is still to come. And if these forgotten worlds still speak to something in you, stay with us. There are more of them waiting to be heard.